No, I would.
So members, we'll resume in 30 seconds if we can. Just a reminder that the meeting is being recorded. I believe we're down in numbers now in the gallery, so there's no need for the video screen out there, so that'll be packed up, but the rest of the meeting will be recorded because we've started recording it, so we'll record the rest of it as well. So if you're happy, Mayor Brad,
yep.
We'll move on to the second table document.
So just for clarification before we get into it, Matt, this is the second of the three table documents. This one is the summary of key themes for consultation foreshore redevelopment project. Okay, everyone on the same page?
The second document's the stormwater, but we'll go to the, or she'll go to the third document.
We'll go to the third document.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
To the stormwater. Sorry. The foreshore redevelopment.
We got it. We're there.
All right. So again, just the same format in these key theme summary documents. So you can see there's strategic alignment of these projects, which dates back to some original intentions in 2012 for citywide streetscape planning, through to 2016 to develop a CBD foreshore precinct plan, and then into 2021, which is deliver key elements of the CBD foreshore marine precincts plan, including the provision, again, of funding in this year's new business plan and budget to proceed with design work to start implementation of projects if possible. So consistent with the Council's strategic planning processes and the consultation in all of those processes over the last 8 years. Key themes emerging from the consultation, and again, this project is effectively quite granular in the design concept that's been presented. I think just a note, and this is probably a learning for us as well as the way we present information. There seemed to be some confusion around which version of plans people were looking at. So some people were still looking at the original master plans, and commentary coming through that we're developing down at the yacht club end was very clearly not in the new plans. And I think that might also be when we look at the presentation of the new plans, we ended the foreshore where the development stops, which was actually near Del Giorno's where the existing playground is. But people looking at it at a glance may have mistaken that to be the yacht club end of the foreshore where that development's occurring. So there's some learnings in there for us as we go through and present this information as well. But effectively, again, going back to this project, this was the key objectives of council when we were looking at this was the foreshore precincts master plan was based around 5 nodes of development along the foreshore, and this redevelopment concept worked to the concept of having a bucket of money which council has considered in the context of its long-term financial plan, and the bucket of money was $7 million, which was allocated by council for planning processes in December when we did the financial modelling. So effectively what we needed to do was look at the key elements from the $16 or so million worth of node development through the original master plan for the foreshore and work out what the key elements were to deliver a $7 million foreshore redevelopment concept plan. Fundamentally it came down to 4 development areas. That was the jetty itself, in terms of looking at activating the jetty, noting that we also have some funding available this year for restoration of the actual jetty structure itself, but the extension of the jetty to allow different vessels to use the jetty. The restoration and repair to the seawall, which again wasn't overly overt in the documentation plans, but it was included in the costings. Nominal amount in there for the restoration of the seawall, which is down towards the Port Lincoln Hotel end of the foreshore, as well as some minor upgrades to the thematics and the balustrading along the foreshore as well. So there was always the intention to allocate money for upgrades to the existing facilities along the foreshore, and particularly the seawall and some of the boardwalk areas. Then the final 2 development areas were the existing playground, which has been reconceptualised as the youth space, or the sort of more independent activity zone. It's not a replacement of the skate park. It's integration of some of these key and popular themes coming out of the original master plan, which was around the basketball court, The other activities are table tennis and incorporating some skatable furniture, which is more aimed at the sort of mid-range age children who are sort of 6 up to about 12 years old, not competent to go to the skate park, but still competent to go and have a bit of a skate on the foreshore, or maybe the younger families are in the actual playground areas. And then the main redevelopment area was the jet, what we'll call the jetty precinct, around the public toilets in that area. So it had ventured away from the concept of the 5 nodes with a price tag of around $16 to $17 million to one foreshore redevelopment plan with 4 key focal areas with a price tag of $7 million, delivering on those key elements. Through the consultation, the key themes coming out of that was some of the positive, create an iconic air peninsula visitor destination, inclusive and accessible play spaces, inclusion of activity spaces for older children, nature and adventure play spaces, shared space car parking, market areas. There's lots of talk about car parking, both positive and negative. Upgrading the jetty for vessels and activating the jetty as a pop-up cafe. Some of the negative themes coming through the consultation process: concern over loss of car parking and access to car parking. The existing fenced toddler playground should be retained. Play spaces and walkway clutter the unique green open space foreshore. The walkway blocking views, risk safety aspects. Deck on top of the toilets unnecessary and unsafe. Lack of shade shelter over the playgrounds. Play for older children in foreshore could lead to antisocial behaviour. Security around the toilets adjacent to play spaces. Town jetty may not be a viable location for vessels to dock. Existing jetty needs repair prior to considering upgrades. And concern over the pop-up cafe will increase competition on Tasman Terrace. And then just some of the misconceptions which have come through the process that it will lead to an increase in council rates. And again, these projects are predicated on no rate increases specifically for these projects, which was part of the determination of council in December in the workshops and into the special meetings. The money could be spent on other priorities. Again, anything. We can say that about anything. Development and impacts yacht club into the lawns. Again, that was probably some confusion around which plans people were looking at in terms of the proposed development. That was one of the key things that we addressed as part of the key elements, was to avoid the yacht club end based on the feedback that was received through the first planning processes. And then concerns over the impact of the jetty upgrade on current uses. So I think there was a few people in there saying, no, you need to keep the swimming enclosure and things like that. And the reality is the swimming enclosure is staying. That's part of the plans moving forwards. So again, just reiterate council's consultation commitment, that council's committed to let the community know how the feedback received will influence the final decisions on these projects, and also how the concerns have influenced the outcomes. I think there's various potentials that can be implemented to address some of the concerns raised through this process. But again, just looking at the next steps, the next step I think really is, depending on the outcome of the funding, is a workshop with the elected members to review the designs, the project objectives and the community consultation feedback in tandem, and go through that in much more detail. We've got to select the architect, the landscape architect, to complete the final design. So again, WAX has been engaged to get us to the grant-ready state. It's council's prerogative whether it continues with WAX as we finalise these plans for the foreshore. We've got to complete the final design, complete the prudential reviews, and then consult with the community at various stages on that as well. The resolution suggested here tonight, and I think rather than delving into the details in terms of, are we going to make comments and statements around car parking or the toilets and things like that at this stage on this particular project, given that there is a separate consultation process out there around car parking and the strategy around car parking, it's probably too early to make decisions on this particular project, because I think, as we've talked about through the consultation process and as I've done in the interviews around the consultation on the car parking strategy, we've got to look at car parking as a system as a whole, not at the individual impacts of individual projects. So I think decisions that council makes around this project and whether there's changes to the car parking need to be informed by council's position on its draft access car parking strategy, which will come in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So the recommendation here, should council wish to make a resolution in relation to this project, is that council request a workshop in early April 2021 to review the concept plans in detail and to discuss the various feedback on the project and how the designs may be modified, altered, staged or otherwise varied before proceeding to finalising the foreshore redevelopment concept plan. I'm happy to take questions.
Just a point, if I can. Both of the projects so far have been, we've applied for the local government infrastructure grant, but we're also applied for Building Ready Regions Fund for them as well. So there's different dates that they'll come back with the grant nods or shaking of the head. But the point is that our deadline was initially the local government infrastructure program. Its finalised date, 29th of January. Yeah. So, but don't forget we've got the federal applications in as well. Yeah. Okay. So, Councillor Staunton, clarification.
Through you, Mayor Brad, what's the process for selecting an architect for this project in particular? That's a question.
So I guess the process will be, and I think the intention is here for a workshop or recommendations for a workshop with the elected members to really go through the design concepts. And I think based on that and based on how comfortable the elected members are that the concept designs aren't too far from where we want to be, if that's something the elected members will resolve, we'll prepare a report. And it could be that the elected members are comfortable to proceed with wax in the current design set. Now, we'll need to market test that and go through a procurement process to validate that. And that could be a direct approach to wax if we want to continue working with them on this project. And I'd suggest that, the reality is if the design is 80% there and there's a few components that council may wish to remove, alter, no changes to car parking, not have toilets with walkways, if council wants to make those determinations but is otherwise happy with the rest of the plans, we could simply move to a direct engagement with wax to finalise the design set. But I think that's probably a recommendation that will come to council if we have a workshop on this, depending on what comes out of the workshop.
Is there any other clarifications, questions at all? Councillor Davies.
Through you, Chair, Matt, when you said the upgrade of the seawall, is that the entirety of the whole seawall from start to finish?
No, through you, Mayor Brad, I think we allocated $350,000 as a nominal amount for upgrading the seawall. So the largest issues we have with the seawall at the moment are effectively the portion from the roundabout, Lewis Street, which then proceeds up towards Lincoln Hotel, where the Norfolk pines have effectively underridden the pathways and deteriorated the seawall. So I guess in consultation with some of the engineers and the landscape architects in the preliminary stages of this, is there could be, without rebuilding the seawalls, which is going to be a significant cost, but there could be minor works done to remediate the walls, effectively patch up and secure the damage, inspect to make sure there's no underlying structural integrity issues, and then potentially repave portions of that, which is effectively part of the Punkala Trail, down the front of the foreshore area there. So there's a nominal allocation in there of about $350,000.
So the paving, just to clarify a bit more, so the paving is a separate than of the 350, or is that
no, the nominal amount of $350,000?
So really, we could be paying the whole lot of the funding just to replace and do that seawall if we were to do the entirety of it. If
you wanted to replace the seawall from one end of the foreshore to the other, and replace the whole seawall, if you're talking about the structure, I'm not sure $7 million would be enough.
So it's basically a patch.
Yes, for that extent, which is the most damaged area of the seawall.
So is there any other clarification questions at all? No, can I have a move then, please? Councillor Dodd. You happy with the resolution as it is?
Yeah, we've got
recommendations.
support a workshop. I think it's a lot of issues in this sort of project discussion.
Okay, second, Councillor Russell.
I would really welcome a workshop just to finalise a few things. I think it's a great project.
Okay, thanks. Any statements for or against? No, all those in favour?
I through you, Chair, I welcome a workshop, but will it come back to the meeting? A meeting after we.
Has to.
That's right. I was just making sure.
Okay.
Okay, so all those in favour? Motion carried. Good. Now we'll go on to the second paper for the third time.
Second paper, third time, sorry for the order. In relation to the stormwater management infrastructure, and again, just the same format in the three documents, reiterating the strategic alignment. So you can see stormwater has been a strategic priority since 2012 there in those plans. And in the long-term financial plan and budget, council's allocated a nominal amount of $500,000 per annum over the next 10 years to address stormwater management infrastructure and issues. So some of the key themes, again, there wasn't a lot of commentary around stormwater other than it should be a key priority, including some commentary in there that we should be increasing funding to expedite or fast track stormwater regardless of whether we get the grant outcomes. Positive, strong majority support for the project, urgent priority, will protect properties and businesses. Negative, stormwater should not be discharged to the ocean. I think that's part of the discussion point moving forwards with the stormwater management plan. Negative, program will not be delivered effectively. And I think that's in relation to commentary on the current situation down near the yacht club of the Airstream pump outlet, which I think, having looked at what's happened there, is effectively as a council solved one problem, but have created another problem. So I guess we're currently in a situation where we're looking at the remediation of that problem and working through that. But obviously that's something that's in the mind of the community as they're providing feedback on these projects. Misconceptions, money spent on Airstream pump station should have solved flooding issues. It did. Well, it was solve. The intention is it solves flooding issues in that particular area. It doesn't accommodate for the flooding risk in other areas. Will lead to an increase in council rates. And again, it's already been funded in council's long-term financial plan for $5 million of expenditure on stormwater management. So it won't lead to an increase in council rates specifically for that allocation. And if we were to secure the $4.7 million from the state government we've asked for, then that's not going to increase the rates on that either. It will increase rates if council wants to extend beyond the $5 million nominal allocation over that 10-year period, so it'll need to be funded from somewhere. But what's being put forward isn't to increase rates specifically. Again, council's commitment to consult with the community, basically to let the community know how their feedback has informed council's decision-making processes. And some next steps, I think the next step is really the council will review the document, the 2019 strategic stormwater management plan document, and consider a number of factors, including prioritisation of projects identified within the stormwater management plan, the methods and techniques, which refers to things like environmentally sustainable water design, and some of those other principles around capturing water rather than releasing water within the stormwater management plan, and further explore funding options, both external and internal, to deliver priority works above what is possible with the nominal council long-term financial plan allocation of $5 million over 10 years. So that's really to indicate that maybe there is a need for council to consider increasing allocations once it's determined what the priority projects are above the $5 million of its existing commitment over the next 10 years, but to look at external sources of funding for that too, which could come through these avenues, but also other avenues like the Stormwater Management Authority and associated funding bodies. So again, if council wishes to make a statement of intent or actually to have some further consolidation of work on the stormwater management plan, the recommendation is the council request a workshop in early April 2021. And again, the timeliness of this is so we can actually start proceeding with the budgeting process for next year, but also if we are securing the funding, we need to prioritise these projects. But request a workshop in early April 2021 to review the Stormwater Management Plan 2019, including a briefing from Tonkin, who have developed the various iterations of the Stormwater Management Plan. And the briefing also provides for discussion around remediation options for the Eyre Street outlet adjacent to the Yacht Club, and request that a priority works program is developed with a funding model and presented to Council for consideration for the delivery of the review of the annual business plan and long-term financial plan, should Council not be successful in securing local government partner funding for these projects. So really the recommendation is to conduct a workshop, have a presentation from Tonkin on the Stormwater Management Plan, consider some of the options and the alternatives in terms of water retention. Also to discuss from Council's perspective some of the remediation options for the Eyre Street outlet adjacent to the Yacht Club. But then, pending the outcome of the funding applications, consider whether Council has allocated sufficient funding over the next 10 years to fund the priority works program. Take questions.
Yeah, so clarification question.
I don't actually have a question, but if somebody else does, I'm happy to move the motion. I think that's very sensible, and they've articulated what we need to do moving forward.
Okay.
Stormwater problem's not going to go away.
Good, thanks. So just, if there's clarification questions, you have a question?
Yeah, I second it. I think it's a great idea.
No, hang on. I just want to, anyone got any questions? Yeah, everyone happy? Okay. Councillor Davis, you moving it? And you spoken, you okay with that? Yep. Councillor Davis, you want to second it?
Yes,
Yeah. Okay, you want to speak on it?
I think it's, yep,
Go.
good move. And I like the way they also incorporated the funding to move forward on the future.
Any statements for or against? Councillor Broadfoot.
I'd just like to thank the team after we got that information from the Yacht Club a few months ago, or 5 or 6 weeks ago. And thanks for the immediate response in liaising with them directly around letting them know what's happening out there. So yeah, thanks for the work that everybody's doing to respond to those community concerns. And this just progresses it. So thanks.
I'd actually like to reconfirm that what I'm seeing from a council profile at the moment is getting out there and talking to people as much as they can. When people are talking back to us, if there's issues there, we're out there and we're talking about quickly. So just confirming what to say. No more statements. Okay, all those in favour? Motion passed. Carried. Thanks very much. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll go back to the beginning. So item 11. Thanks, by the way, to all the staff for the input on those 3 programs that we just put forward. And a huge amount of work there. Really good stuff. Good leadership. Point 11, Council Committee reports and minutes. There are none. Item 12, Chief Executive Officer reports, resolution status reports. I don't know there's a need to talk on that. Is there? Everyone had a look at those?
As we've listed questions, noting that we've integrated the new status which was discussed at the last council meeting.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah. So, any questions or clarification there at all? No. Can I have a mover then, please? Councillor Rousseau.
Yeah, I'm happy to move it. I've gone through it. Thank
Do you want to speak on it, Rob?
No, I've gone through both of it and I'm happy with it. Thank you.
Thanks. Can I have a second, please? Deputy Mayor Jack. Yep. Do you want to speak on it, Jack? Okay. All those in favour? Motion carried. Item 12.2 is the EPLGA board meeting, 25th February 21. CEO and I attended that as part of the LGA conference that we had here. There's a couple of motions that came through that are probably relevant to Councillor Broadfoot. The coastal protection thing over there was basically they wanted an accountability back through to the LGA rather than because there was no accountability. So that's really the only structural change that I think would come there. I'm happy to talk in detail.
Yeah, that was my recommendation too. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, is there any questions concerning the item 12.2? No, great. Okay, all those in, oh, sorry, I better get a motion. Are you going to move? Sorry.
Yeah, I
Councillor.
attended that meeting. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's right. You were there as well.
Yeah.
You want to talk on it, Rob?
Yeah, one thing that came out was that there's quite a bit of unity within the eventually until it comes to coastal versus not coastal, and then there's a bit of division, but other than that, good meeting.
Yeah, that's good. And a second for that, please. Councillor Staunton, you want to talk on it? No. Any other statements at all for or against? All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you very much. Item 12.3 is delegations under the Planning Development Infrastructure Act. Jess, Rob?
Mr Mayor, just briefly, Jess Burns is here to deal with any details, if there are any. We had a false start a month ago on this, not through any fault of ours. Some of the detail and the regulations changed, and then the LGA and the lawyers needed to rework the template. That's all been done. This is a flow on of the Planning Development and Infrastructure Act, and you may recall, we as a Phase 3 Council will be rolling over to that on the 19th of March. So that doesn't have a lot of time to sort out the sub-delegations after this, but they can be done. So this is all based on a template set of delegations recommended by Northern Waterhouse lawyers through LGA, and our application of which of those powers appear to be appropriate for you to delegate to the CEO. From there, the CEO will delegate most of them to the general manager and or the regional assessment manager, but that's another process. So that's all of those things are reflected in the attachments, that great detail of in the schedule and the attachments. So other than that, Mr Mayor, we can deal with any questions if there are any.
There's nothing more exciting than reading a delegations manual. There's nothing more exciting than reading a delegations manual. I'm assuming that report is for information only.
No,
Is there a recommendation?
No.
1, 2, 3.
Everyone?
The first version of the agenda that I put on the internet, there wasn't.
Oh, there's a big. I didn't have one of mine. So.
No, now on the agenda.
All right, so
I've actually just noticed several of those recommendations refer to the 15th of February. The attachments for the 15th of February item in section 15th of March.
do you want to change that?
So they can be changed.
So this is actually a procedural approach here, essentially. So, is there any clarifying questions of Rob or Jess at all?
I've just got great admiration for the work that's gone into this. I mean,
Yeah.
we're running
Yes.
and having to put this in place in such quite time frames. And I suppose we're reading the paper on everything, so it's all done. So thank you.
Good. I'm trying to channel everything so that we get the clarification questions out the way first, and we'll come back to the statements. I don't want to confuse it, but it's a pretty good point that you made. So, no clarification questions at all. Okay, can I move it, please? Councillor Dodd, I'll speak on it, Jeff.
Well, it's just make a comment. It'd be nice if planning actually paid councils for the cost of actually changing acts, delegation, everything else that's involved. It's taking up so much time.
Yeah, don't be silly. You got a second on that?
Yeah.
Got to speak on it, Will?
Just I like watching Matt move at the speed of light, so I'm sure you have those delegations, sub-delegations done by the morning. They're probably already done.
Someone else is asleep.
I had drafted you for it.
Yeah.
There's a good woman there.
So statements for or against, or any further questions at all? No? Okay, thanks very much. All those in favour, please. Motion carried, thanks. Yeah, appreciate the amount of work that's going on there, guys. Item 12.4 is the Ravendale Community Sports Centre representation. Over to you, Matt, on that one.
Yes, so this is a report that relates to council representation on the Ravendale Community Sports Centre Inc., which is the body that is currently holding the lease from council for management of the Ravendale complex. So council previously in 2018 appointed Councillor Dodd and CEO Stephen Rufus as the council representatives to the cooperative board. and Councillor Dodd has emailed myself, which is the notification to council there, that he wishes to retract the nomination for the committee. That, in light of discussions I've had with Mick Bascom from Ravendale, and trying to understand when the committee last had an AGM or a meeting, and who the current nominees were, has revealed some concerns around the current constitution of the committee. And as you can see in the report, the general membership appointments to the committee, Steve Prout and Ros Daniels from the Tasman Football Club. Mike Owens is one representative appointed from the Hockey Association, the other one's vacant. I believe the Hockey Association are reluctant to appoint anyone else to the committee. And you can now see that there's 2 vacant appointments from the City of Port Lincoln, and the community reps are effectively Miss Mick Bascom and a vacancy on there. And through correspondence received from Mick, there was a move that there was going to be a direct appointment of a community member to the committee without an AGM or without subsequent meetings. So the concern I have there is that council owns the facility. There's a committee running the facility which is not abiding by its obligations under the Corporations Associations Act, and that really before council appoints new members, for no issues with council appointing representation onto the committee, because it's in council's best interest that that committee is functioning appropriately. But I believe if council is to appoint members to the committee, that it should be done on the basis that an AGM needs to be held, and office bearers need to be duly appointed, and that needs to be a process that is undertaken before any other activity or involvement of council occurs in that regard. I think just through pure circumstance and time, it seems that Mick Bascom has been left effectively holding the can, in a sense, in relation to Ravendale. And this is not a commentary on, I guess, Mick's commitment or the dedication that Mick has provided to that facility. This is just a situation where, as CEO, I can't recommend council appoint members to this committee until this committee is legally incorporated and operating under its incorporation. So the recommendation there to our members is that council appoint 2 members, subject to the appointment, the appointment being subject to an AGM being held. That a fully constituted committee is established, including the appointment of office holders. The council provides assistance to facilitate the AGM, as given the fact that the resourcing there in the committee isn't apparent at the moment. And that a regular meeting schedule is set for the coming 12 months. And that through that process and re-establishing the regular meetings, the AGM and the office holders, that there can be some formal constitution around the structure of that committee, including the governance of the items and some of the control matters around the finances of the committee as well. So that's the reporting recommendation, and happy to take questions. But the recommendation is, if council wants to proceed down that path, is that we call for nominations or nominate elected members.
Okay, is there any
I've got a
questions?
question.
Yes.
I've got 2 questions. One through you to Councillor Dodd about why he withdrew, and 2 about the potential for any legal liability for council members who stand representing council on the basis that, yeah, anyway, just answer the questions first.
Yeah. Okay, so you're open to answer that.
Through the chair, I just support Matt's comments in relation to the needs to get back on track in relation to Constitution, Corporation Act. And I've been on there a long time, off and on, and I've a new bloke to go through it, I think.
Okay, thanks. And the second question was?
About liability issues.
Clarification liability.
Legal liability, we maybe need to clarify that, but my understanding is that elected members acting on behalf of council, appointed by council, would be covered by council's indemnity,
Vicariously liable.
and then under the Local Government Act as well.
Do you want to take that on notice?
We can take that on notice.
Third question, because I'm considering standing, even though I spent 4 years in there as hockey president. Fourth question was, is there any consideration of some sort of staff representation in there, given it's a council facility, or some sort of, I don't know, subcommittee or some sort of way of council providing additional assistance, governance assistance beyond facilitating the AGM that comes from a staffing perspective as well as an elected member perspective.
Through you there, Brad, I guess there's two aspects to that. There's the actual representation on the committee, which would be the council appointees, which is actually part of the decision-making of that committee. And I would suggest that staff would be best served as observers and will attend depending on need. And I guess if we're looking at, appointing staff, I mean, you've got half of the staff who may be considered to be appointed sitting in the room here. Now, they have very operational needs to interact with the Ravendale Committee from a property management, facility management, from a leasing perspective. And for them to be appointed to be on the committee, it would actually then prohibit them being able to carry out their operational duties. So an elected member, if there's a conflict, and I'm trying to recall the conflict of interest training that we had a few weeks ago, if there's a conflict of interest that arises or felt to be arise with elected members, they can remove themselves from the chamber and the other 8 elected members can decide on the matter. When you've got one staff member who's dealing with property and leases and they have a conflict of interest, then you're not left with many people to actually deal with the details of the lease agreements. So the advice would be that council appointed elected members and that council staff observe and attend meetings if required. In terms of provision of administrative support, this committee is its own legal entity. So it is a legal entity separate from council. So council is not obliged to provide administrative support, just like we're not obliged to provide administrative support to the senior citizens or hockey association or any of those associations. But it would be advisable in the short term to provide some assistance to assist with the AGM and maybe setting up some templates that can be used by the incoming exec, which needs to appoint a secretary to actually administer the affairs of and the communication and the minutes and the agendas for that. I wouldn't see council supporting it in ongoing administrative resources.
Clarification question?
This is a question, yes. Through the chair, Matt, can we either switch the air conditioner off or put the heater on?
All right, David, so fair enough.
Okay. So, Councillor Davis?
Yes, through you, Mayor Brad, in relation to conflict of interest, yes, there will be a conflict of interest. That's what I got out of that meeting that we had recently, that training session, and that concerns me, the fact that we're withdrawing 2 people from the chamber to be able to make decisions around a facility that we own. We can't get out of that until such time, that situation, until such time that the Constitution is looked at and reviewed. Maybe those people become observers. We discussed that, and I shared that information in relation to the role of a representative at Matthew Flinders. This is a community facility. To me, it's the community that should be running it, and that they report under the Incorporation Act their business, and part of the Constitution is that we actually, the council, the community has some capacity to know that they are going to be financially viable, that they're meeting obligations, and that we are meeting our obligations as well. Constitution, I went through, and I have great concerns at the representation there. I don't think that the community representation is big enough. And I think that there are, you're looking at 6 people, maybe 8 people taking on a lot of responsibility there.
Everything you're saying is relevant, but it's a statement. So I'm asking for clarification.
Sorry, okay, well, my clarification is the Constitution likely to be looked at in relation to council? Sorry, I do apologise, but I was sort of coming to that.
Through you, Mayor Brad, I would suggest that if council wants to make it a condition of the appointment, there is a review of the charter of the incorporated body as part of the condition of appointment of elected members within 6 months, whatever the period is, then that's certainly a condition we can place on there. Ultimately, it is its own legal entity, so council can't force it to review its charter or its terms of reference. All it can say is we won't appoint anyone unless you do. So I think that's potentially a consideration in there. it does raise the issues, I guess, as council as the owner of the facility and that incorporated body being the lessee of the facility. If it's not legally functioning under the Incorporated Associations Act, that council, if it still believes it's not functioning correctly, may take action as required under the lease. But that's a separate discussion.
It's a question. Sorry, not late. So on that basis, if we don't appoint anybody, what happens?
We'd be speculating now through Mayor Brad, but I guess if we don't appoint anybody to the committee, we actually have no seat at the table or any desire or real enforcement mechanism to call an AGM and get the committee sorted out in a sense and get the resourcing and the support in there, get the clubs involved into it and trigger that review of the charter. Effectively, it becomes a waiting game for council in terms of it will function in some form as an independent organisation leasing a facility from council over the next 12 months. And I could just about guarantee you we will receive complaints from member associations. Legally, we would then need to look at how we sit then under the lease and the lease terms with them operating in that regard. We're speculating about what might happen without any concrete answers there.
So what I'll do is I'll split it so we cover off in the first part first. I'm a mover for the first part of the recommendation. Councillor Davis.
I'm happy to move the first part. If we could add a point that brings in what we're doing is on the following conditions is that a review of the Constitution of the Incorporated Act.
Request a review?
Yeah, request a review of the Incorporated Act of the Constitution. Oh, just on the Constitution, that's fine.
Is there any objections to that?
Within a 6-month period. I'd be happy to make that motion. I mean, I'm happy to be guided too by others in the room.
So can I just suggest, Mayor Brad, through you, that we put a comma on the end of 12 months and an and.
And, all right.
And then we change the word called in point A to held.
Scheduled and held.
And held, right?
It's through you.
No.
Through you. And one of the issues has been, like, the Constitution says 40 members for an AGM. So that's been one of the perennial issues, is even being able to get enough people to a meeting.
So, all right, so we've got a mover and you've spoken.
Yes, I'm happy.
So you're okay with that? Can I have a second then, please? Councillor, sorry, Deputy Mayor Richie, you want to talk about it?
No, makes sense.
Okay, good. Any statements for or against? Okay, all those in favour? Motion carried, thanks very much. So we come to point 2 now. So, do you have any nominations or I'm happy?
Can I have another question?
Sure.
Another question is there established office bearers now? So is there a secretary and a...
No, I don't think there's anything.
Is there a secretary and treasurer?
My understanding at the moment from the last correspondence I had was that Mick Bascom is the chairperson and also the appointed committee rep and is also the volunteer manager that services the committee. I'm not aware that there's, I think the other office positions are currently vacant.
Yeah. Which puts them in breach of the... So,
Which is why we need to fix it.
So I know that Councillor Dodd's not going to put his name in the hat for this. So is there anyone that would like to put the name forward to go on the committee? Secretary picks it up. Councillor Broadfoot,
Yeah.
put her name forward.
With joy and grace and hope
We
and
need,
love.
we need a second person to put their name forward. None of us are busy, I know that.
Don't leave me there on my Nigel.
We can't take nominations from the gallery, but it's nice to know. Councillor Lynn, are you?
Yeah, I'll stupid enough.
Is there any objections from anyone in the room concerning the two names that have been put forward at this stage? Okay, so now we're going to do a 2/3 vote for nominations, please.
I think we need to move the motion. If someone's willing to move the motion,
Let's roll
those
the
two
motion.
names.
Councillor Kelly, would you like to move the motion?
Yes, I would like to move the motion and be grateful to accept the nominations.
And should be so noted, I should think. Okay, can I have a second for that, please? Councillor Rousseau.
I greatly accept their nominations and thank them. And wish them
Any
luck.
statements for or against? Councillor.
Saying wonderful.
It's not you.
But it's also a great opportunity, I think. So it's an amazing facility for the community out there, and it's a great opportunity to actually really build the resilience and the long-term future of that.
That's pretty well said, Jack. I think the point is that it is a great facility, and this is a chance for us to pick it up and take it into the future. And also to acknowledge where we've been as well. So that's good. Yeah, okay. All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you. So item 12.5 is petition. No, we've done that. 12.5. 12.6 we've done. 12.7 we've done.
13.1.
Policy number.
So 13, yep, item 13, corporate community reports, finance and business, busking policy. Oh, okay. Do we need to review that? I noticed it was only a change in the.
There's been no changes, rather than there's nominal changes. So it's really just to revoke the current one and adopt this one.
Yeah.
Policy.
No questions? Okay, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Staunton, you want to talk on it? No. Can I have a second, please? Councillor Jolly, you want to talk on it, please?
It's an excellent policy.
Well, I thought that too. I did note the amendment. I think you changed the numbers, didn't you? Yeah, okay. All right, no statements for or against? Questions? Okay, all in favour? Motion carried, thank you. Thanks. David, another one for you is your corporate and community budget development timelines.
Thanks, Mayor Brad. This is for information purposes, just to let councillors know what the plan is. And in summary, you've got the community drop-in sessions next week. Through April and May, we'll work through budget and annual business plan workshops. What we do need to try and work to this year is also getting the information to the audit committee. And in the past, sometimes it's been after the event, it's before the event this time. And we will also, you may notice, sorry, what I wanted to point out is we had started doing July adoptions. We want to try and get back to the June adoption for these, which is why we are sort of pushing it forward a little bit and trying to get it done. And as a result, there will be a special council meeting during that consultation period for members of the public to come and give their submissions. Otherwise, information purposes.
So they're all set, they're the dates.
Yeah.
That's,
I'll send that.
Oh, thank you.
24 and 26. That'll be in the Northern Arts. Yeah, okay. For information, thank you very much, David. So item 13.2 is people governance and communication nil. 13.3 community culture and recreation. Draft City Port Lincoln Disability Action and Inclusion Plan for community consultation. David, through Helena.
yes, thanks, Brad. And there's been quite significant amount of work that's gone into this. If there are any questions, bear with us. Obviously, there were different staff dealing with this. Janet and Kathy were dealing with it. Now it's come across to Helena and I, but we needed to get it wrapped up. So Helena and staff have done a fair bit of work to get that done. What this is about is all local government bodies have to submit a disability and access inclusion plan. We needed to go out to community consultations. This is the draft iteration of that, and that's what's presented to you tonight to endorse to go to community consultation. Once that's done, we'll then come back to council to adopt the plan.
Okay, is there any clarification at all? I've had a scan through the document, it looks pretty good, and it's good that we've got one actually. So, it's one of the things that a lot of the rate base actually talk to me about. So, yeah, okay. Can I have a mover then, please? Councillor Jolly, you want to talk on it, please?
No, it's a necessary plan, and it's It's in line with current policies of government, etc. It's necessary to have, it's a step in the right direction.
Thank you very much. Have a second, please. Councillor Dodd, do you want to talk about that? Okay. Any statements for or against? Yes.
I guess honour the work that has gone into it, and I think particularly one of the things we've talked about is continuity of footpaths and ways of people being able to access, with prams and wheelchairs and gophers. So thanks for all your work, Elena, with this. It's a good, lots of things getting wrapped up, which is excellent.
David, it's noted that you didn't contribute at all.
Oh, and David.
I just checked it.
Yeah.
Make sure the work is getting done.
Okay. All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you. Item 13.3.2 is the new community land lease agreement, 30 Coronation Place with Bedford Group. We've had some pretty significant information on this before, I think, David.
Brad, I'm sorry, if I could just address the meeting before we get into that.
Yes, ma'am.
Councillors, I need to just go back to, I'm not sure if I've interpreted this incorrectly, but I'm just going to ask Amanda to call up a recommendation from the special council meeting that we had on the 25th of January. So this was all part of the funding agreements that we were looking at, proposals. And if we go to 1.6, which is page 7 of 10.
Yeah.
So 1.6, that council places a temporary freeze on the establishment of long-term lease or license arrangements for council facilities until the council facilities review has been completed and the impacts of the new proposed construction have been considered. Now, my initial interpretation of that is that was in relation to the Hallett Place site or anything related to those funding projects, not in relation to any other ongoing or new leases that may come up and that are completely removed from that situation. But I wanted to bring that to your attention because if you disagree with that and believe that that is preventing us from doing any leases whatsoever, then we can't proceed this evening on the reports that I've given you this evening. However, if you are happy with that interpretation of it, I know it's not in black and white, so to speak, but that's how I've read it in the context of that whole report and the resolutions that are above it, then we can proceed on to the reports this evening.
So just to clarify, Brad, the intention of that resolution in that report was to look at potential facilities and property of council that may be utilised to service the need of the youth, the West Coast Community Group and Passionist Productions and other occupants of that current site. I don't believe any of these facilities would be suitable for that purpose. And I guess if it is desired for council to consider these reports and move these recommendations tonight, debatable, but there is the possibility that we could add some words into the resolutions that refer to the resolution from the special meeting along the lines of the council notwithstanding its resolution in relation to a lease freeze, enter into a lease agreement. So that way you're acknowledging the lease freeze is in place, but in spite of that, you're still entering into agreement. So there's arguable whether or not it's the need to revoke previous resolutions or whether that's sufficient, given that the intent of those resolutions wasn't to interfere with these other properties, it was more to specifically deal with properties that may be usable as spaces for Passionist West Coast community youth and youth activity areas. So if that's a position that council is comfortable moving forward with, then I suggest that that could be accommodated into the recommendations.
Clarification questions?
Yeah.
Councillor Lynn?
My point was, could that be sort of a preamble that goes into the purpose of the report to come in and say, this doesn't cover, this isn't something that is going to be looked at by other youth groups or the Hallett Place thing and do it that way as a little preamble? Would that be sufficient to cover that, or does it need more? I could just see people looking back at that and say, hey, you said that, now you're doing this. And then
I think you'd be okay in the talk, isn't it? On the point, so there's a sentence in there that says,
You could add a sentence in it, because I guess if you reflect back on the resolution from the special meeting, it was really about having discussions with displaced groups. So if you were to move or change the wording that council, notwithstanding the freeze on leases as per council special meeting 25th of January 2021, enter into the lease agreement with Bedford, authorise the CEO and mayor, and then put a dot point 3, acknowledge that this is not a property that could realistically be used by any of the displaced groups from the Adelaide Hallett Place redevelopment project. If that satisfies the requirements, I think that's suitable.
so that's actually in the motion itself we're talking about.
Yep.
Okay, so the words there.
Question there would put a bit worth adding the word potential into that as well. So it's so potentially displaced.
Yep.
So what are the words that are going to want to?
So the council,
notwithstanding resolution dated the 25th of January 2021 regarding the freeze. I'm sorry, so the council, notwithstanding the resolution, special council resolution, dated 25th of January 2021 regarding the freeze on the establishment of long-term lease or license agreement arrangements. Enter into, and then we're saying in the last, add on number 4.
just before you get to number 4, number 1 actually becomes part of the, so that council notwithstanding, so you can basically get rid of.
No, it's not a number, that take on number 1. Council notwithstanding, and then after arrangements it becomes 1.
Yep, so carriage, yep, so it becomes dot point 1 there.
Was it long-term lease agreements or license arrangements? So
Exactly, that's what it was long-term lease or license arrangements is the term.
oh, yeah.
And then dot point 3 then the bottom, that's right now.
And so what are we saying there, Matt? You thought that this, on the basis that this is not a property that would be potential,
Likely to be suitable
that is likely to be suitable.
groups potentially displaced from the Adelaide / Hallett Place redevelopment project.
Is there any clarification questions on that? Councillor Dodd.
Just one, I reckon in the existing lease, it's request for renewal of lease no sooner than 3 months, no later than 6 from the time of expiry. Doesn't it actually expire until the end of December 22? I'm just wondering if they already requested renewal of the lease.
What they've requested is some form of long-term surety so that they can go and secure funding.
Okay,
So what
this
we
is a
wanted,
new
so the
lease.
lease doesn't expire until the end of the year. They have asked for confirmation of that, and we said we'll bring it to council so they can get confirmation so they can take that to secure funding.
Okay, so clarity is this is a brand new lease, not a
That's
renewal.
correct. That's what we are proposing.
Okay, any other clarification questions? No? Okay, can I have a mover then, please? Councillor Staunton, you want to talk about that? Okay, can I have a second, please? Councillor Rousseau, you want to talk about that?
I just think it's a great opportunity for them to be able to secure funding and growing. They're doing some great work there, and in that sort of business, you do need that security. So I think 21 years is awesome. So thank you for that.
Thanks. Statements for or against? All good. All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you, councillor. So we'll need to now carry that forward into the next reports as well. So the next one is with the Park Terrace Kindergarten. Councillors may recall that this actually was brought up some years ago, where Nigel actually brought it to council in the first instance, and it has been in abeyance for quite a while. It was kind of worked on working through another lease arrangement with the Department of Education, which has been sorted out. And Don, and as you can see, has done quite a bit of work just to try and start getting things up to date and caught up, which I'd like to make note of. And Don now has met with the principal and they've agreed basic terms. If I'm not mistaken, you have run those through the department as well. And so that's the proposal for the agreement to be entered into.
This is actually logic, by the way, too. This is a good outcome, good quick outcome that took a long time to get to where we are now, but it just makes a lot of sense. So we just wait till we get it.
So again, we're going to have to
read
put in there. So subject to completion of further negotiations, notwithstanding the resolution.
That council.
No,
That council.
council, subject to satisfactory
And notwithstanding the resolution.
and notwithstanding the resolution dated. Why is that? Right, so councillors are happy with that.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor Broad.
Yeah, I'm happy to move this, and thanks, Dom, for your work with this, because I got asked out to the kindy some years ago and we looked at how that could all work and, you know, saw the space, and they definitely, you know, had the little kids looking through to that bit of extra space which they could utilise. So yeah, thanks very much for getting that progressed.
Put that one side, just hold it. Just no clarification question.
No.
Okay.
I'm gonna go home.
Councillor Davies, do you have a question?
No, I was just seconding.
Okay, all right. So a question, Councillor.
Clarification as to why you didn't consider community consultation, whether the act of leasing a community plan, a 5-year lease or less, doesn't require community consultation if it's in conjunction with the land management or the land management plan, community land. Now, in our community land management plan, it doesn't say anywhere that it can be leased outside of recreation and sport. And you're leasing to the education department. I'm just wondering why you don't consider public consultation a necessity for this lease.
It's recreation, they're playing.
It's education. It's outside the gambit of the agreement we already have in place.
I picked up on that too. I did. No. Do you want to take that on notice?
We take it on notice. I mean, we'd have to look at the community land management plan, and we'd have to look at the dedication of that particular parcel to see if it falls under that remit.
Page 7, if you want to go to it.
Yeah.
You can't do any harm to include community consultation.
Maybe pass a motion.
The resolution subject to that also.
Yes, the resolution has to change subject to community consultation.
Yeah, that's easy. Do that.
So perhaps on the completion of further negotiations and subject
Well, subject to satisfactory completion of further negotiations and community consultation.
As if required,
If required.
under the
yeah.
community land management plan and council's public consultation policy.
Or automatic.
and subject to community consultation if required. And notwithstanding the resolution. And
So is there anything else, Councillor Dodd, that we need to worry about?
Sorry, can we just clarify that the mover and the second are happy with those?
So, and just in there, it needs to say if required under the community land management, whatever you just said.
Yeah,
Land management plan.
So,
You should be on the Ravendale committee.
so Councillor Broadfoot,
Nothing slips by you.
so Councillor Broadfoot, you're the mover on that. You're okay with the amendments?
Yeah.
Now, I haven't given Councillor Davis a chance to have a talk on it. You want to speak on it at all?
Yeah, I'm happy with the,
You're okay with the amendments? Yeah, good, okay.
I just had a question.
Yeah.
Just in regards to the growth of the school and the kindergartens and restriction of space, whether this is a bigger conversation, whether you might have had it. Have you had a conversation with education department in regards to the growth of the school and the lack of space and then pressure on the area, particularly with projects coming up, but you know, they're going to run out of space. And are they going to take over Centenary Oval land?
No,
Which
no,
they sort of do.
no, we haven't, like I said, this has been a concept that they've had for a number of years of just making use of that additional area. It had gone through the previous council where in principle support was given again, you know, with finding the survey sorted out and all that sort of thing. So it's just a matter of wrapping this one up while we are in a position to do so. And we haven't had any further conversations regarding bigger picture and further strategies.
Just on that, I noticed we've got we were a seconder on there, but just in response to that as well, there is correspondence going out this week to all the schools, the key community groups, asking or providing the opportunity for direct dialogue with myself and also with Brad if it's availability, to understand the pipeline of planning for some of these key organisations so that we can understand when we're doing our own plan what the overlap and synergies are for exactly these purposes, because quite often we're dealing with these things in a transactional manner without an understanding of the bigger picture. And an example of that is Navigator College and the growth of Navigator College and the implications for the traffic management around Navigator College. So in awareness of the fact that sometimes we need to have the broader picture, there is communication going out to these schools and groups directly to invite them to have some dialogue around the next 2 to 3 year pipeline that works for these groups.
Through the chair.
Excuse me, I've had my hand up for quite considerable time.
Sorry, I haven't seen it,
to ask
Faye.
a question. Thank you.
So,
I'm sorry, I've just watched your eyes roam around the room.
no, I haven't seen it.
I appreciate the opportunity to ask a question. Thank you.
Yeah.
I
I'll come back to Councillor Dodd.
through you, Mayor Bragg, to CEO, you mentioned that there have been some negotiations or discussions around other areas that John has had with the Education Department. Is that correct? Or can I get a bit of clarification in relation to that?
Through you, Mayor Brad, I didn't mention any discussions that Dobbin.
It was the Centenary Oval.
Centenary Oval. So the communication, I'm no longer on the board for the Football League, so I feel comfortable in having these conversations. So has there been a conversation with the Port Lincoln Football League in relation to the area that's been identified and the possible potential use of that space by the league in the future if they did choose to?
It's not part of the league lease, I don't think, is it?
Yeah, so
It is part of the footprint, but it's actually behind the.
It's
Thank
behind the shed,
behind
yes,
the-
I know what
Thank
it is.
Yeah.
So in answer to your question, no. I haven't had discussions with the league with regards to the board. With
Yeah,
regards
not
to
just the operations manager, the board themselves, because it is a part of the Port Lincoln Football League lease. It is football grounds quite often are adding play spaces, and they're the reason for the delay originally that I understood, I may be wrong, in that lease area going ahead, and the delay was that there was to be due consideration around traffic going through that area, which hasn't happened, and in and out of that gate. And the fact that the kindergarten was built there, and there were concerns about continued encroachment onto Centenary Oval on a daily basis, that there was a high usage by the Education Department, particularly the junior primary school. I mean, these kids don't have somewhere to play. The Port Lincoln High School regularly turns up without the league knowing for sporting activities. They don't have goalposts at their oval anymore. So the schools are using those grounds on a large basis, and the Port Lincoln Football League does work very hard to negotiate and talk to the schools. The Port Lincoln Junior Primary School have their sports day there. They utilise it at recess time and at lunchtime. So there's a whole lot of use that is taking place. And I just think that the league needs to be consulted in relation to this.
If I may, there is a memorandum of understanding that's been developed for the primary school.
Junior primary?
Junior primary school. So that was one part of the equation,
Yeah.
and currently that is with the Education Department and the principal of that school.
Yes.
There were some amendments that we weren't happy with, that we wanted, so that's been put.
So it has, on that basis also then, I'm not aware, and I've only resigned from the board about 5 weeks ago, that there has been no consultation we've got a football league board that I'm aware of.
You're correct.
In relation to the utilisation of that oval. The oval is being used quite substantially by a whole lot of other organisations, but also too, if there are training opportunities for Norwood Football Club to come over here to engage with schools, they go to Centenary Oval. We've got touch football there.
So, just to get to your point for a second.
All right, so my question is, what consultation is taking place?
So the point is,
Mr. Mayor, if I can just clarify here, what Dom's inherited, as I recall, was 2 instructions. One was to get this sorted out, the kindergarten component, which is actually extracting a small component right up in that corner. And all those concerns about how is the school going to grow, what's going to happen next, etc. They're all relevant concerns, but we had an instruction to sort this out. That's number 1. Number 2 was a separate instruction, as I recall, to work with the primary school, the junior primary school, to formalise an arrangement whereby the school uses the oval in the various ways that it does. That's what Dom's been progressing with various discussions backwards and forwards. They start and move a little bit, and then there's a lot of delay. It's usually how those discussions go. Then my understanding was that there was engagement through Dom with either representatives of the board, and I thought that we actually had feedback that said that engagement included feedback from the board. That's what I thought we were hearing. Maybe that's not right, but we need to clarify that. Notwithstanding, at some point in time, Dom and others will bring forward a report to council that will present where we've arrived at. If it's valid or more worthwhile that we do that now, and council sees it in principle before we spend another 3 months arguing over details, maybe we can do that. But at some point in time, there's a license. It's a license agreement we're talking about, isn't it?
With
the school.
With the school memorandum of understanding.
So
I spoke to Quinn, and it's in writing that, so how we left is once the amendments that we wanted out of the agreement was in place, then we would send it to the Port Lincoln Football Association for them to vet before we took it any further.
So you've been liaising with representatives.
Council will see that document ultimately, and if there's still a need to consult further, then
you need to have perhaps a word in there that talks about consultation with the football league. Should that be in there? The word be incorporated in the recommendation of consultation with the football league occurred. Yeah. Hang on a second. Still got 2 questions. There we go. Just a second. So do you want to put that in the right place?
Is that in relation to this, or is it in relation to the separate document around the access to the oval?
Through you, Mayor, the way I see it, I didn't know that is part of the leased space already. So they've got to be consulted on it before we can finalise it. Yeah, so
that's okay. All right.
That's right, but they need to be.
So we've already had it moved and seconded, I think, haven't we?
Yeah. So we've got Councillor Broadfoot and Councillor.
So you happy with the amendment about the consultation?
Yeah, sure.
League? Councillor Davies, yeah, you're okay with that? All right, good. Now, Councillor Stewart, I'll get back to Councillor John, then I'll go back to Councillor Stewart.
Quick question to Matthew. You mentioned that you're planning to have meetings with the schools in the near future to discuss strategic directions, etc., going forward. That be correct?
Yep,
correct.
What I had done was foreshadow a notice of motion in relation to those long-term impacts of the schools, the junior and the primary school in the CBD area. And this motion triggered it because essentially it's another band-aid fix for a problem that's been ongoing for 20 odd years. But Councillor Davis has alluded to lack of space, they've built themselves out. They've got nowhere to go essentially, and I've got a real concern that the Minister and his wisdom can change the dedication whenever he likes. And Centenary Oval is sitting right next door to those primary schools. Now, the long-term strategy to see a new school develop outside the CBD would be ideal. Those discussions could be had at some stage, the time frame attached to them. It could alleviate a lot of issues that we currently experience in the CBD. So if you're going to have those discussions. I'll sit aside on my notice of motion. And hopefully you report back to council with some positive outcomes.
That's in the next 4 weeks, isn't it? Well,
4 to 6 weeks. Yeah, and the intention there is that there's no surprises. I mean, the main driver for that is if we're planning infrastructure upgrades or facility upgrades or traffic upgrades or repairs on roads, there's no surprises that we go and do something and then 3 months later we get a request to put a school crossing, those sorts of objectives. So certainly if there's anything that needs to be considered that overlaps with our thought processes, we can have discussions around that at the budget briefing workshops. And then if you still feel the desire to move a notice of motion, we can proceed from there.
Okay, thanks. You're on. Councillor Storm.
Mine was just on page 2, 1.1.2, and at the bottom there's a couple of errors in the reference source not found. That's all. Just
In the report.
in the lease.
In the attachment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And right at the bottom, it's got an error reference source not found. And there's also on page 3, so there's probably a few in there.
Just have a review of that.
Just be copied and pasted.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. All right. All those in favour?
Somebody just close the debate.
What?
Close the debate. I can speak.
Not unless you really want to.
No, well, just if you go and look at the space, there's some trees just right behind the fence, and it's going to just give the kids some trees to climb in. Like it's 300 square metres. It's just.
It's nothing really.
And it's in behind where it's behind the tank, and it's where it just gives them a little bit more space. So if you go and have a look, yeah, but to fully take on your points about the longer term strategic big picture of what's happening. So
Well, we could be fighting about this for the next 20 years because we did it for the last 20 years.
It's worth noting that it's where Ian Burford wanted to build the skate park.
is that where another mount?
Okay, thanks. They've closed off. So all those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you.
The last lease document for tonight.
13.3.4 is the new community land lease agreement, Mill Cottage. Oh, okay.
And again, although this one we could probably get what no, actually it's a new lease because it expires, so we need the same terms in there. But this one's pretty straightforward. Mill Cottage, Settlers Cottage, expires in March.
Happy to move it.
Thank you. So Andy, catch it up all right?
Comfortable.
I can't see what's going on.
Can you charge him?
So is there any clarification questions for David at all? No, can I have a move then, please? Councillor Broadfoot, do you want to speak on it? No, can I have a second? Councillor Dodd, do you want to speak on it? No. Any statements for or against? All those in favour? Motion carried. Councillor Dodd. Thank you. Item 14 is infrastructure and environmental services reports, extinguishment of easement. This is one of the most important things.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sure this needs no discussion whatsoever. Murray's left for the night.
Who's left?
Okay. No clarification questions. If you've gone through your documents, you should know what it's all about. All right. No move for it, please. Councillor Slaughton, I'm talking about. Good. Councillor Dodd. I'm talking about. No. Any statements for or against? All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you. Item 14.2, development services nil. 14.3, environment and safety nil. 14.4, major projects nil. Item 15, there are no confidential council committee reports and minutes. No confidential reports, and the next meeting is on the 19th of April at 6:30 p.m. Thank you very much for a sterling effort from everyone tonight. It was very well done by the elected body and the staff, and very well put together. And the gallery did a good job as well. Thank you very much. Yeah. And I now close the meeting.